Good afternoon. My name is Keith Remmels, and I appreciate all of you being here today. We want to talk a little bit this afternoon about exploring what sacred belonging is, and the working definition we have used is this: the unique sense of belonging that can be found in a community of faith when individuals feel a shared sense of being seen, included, and valued, and which reminds them that they are beloved and made in the image of God.
And hi, I'm Freddie Bleeker-Franks, and that description of sacred belonging is hard to articulate. It's one of those things, you'll know it when you experience it. It could be different for different people. Welcoming someone into your space is inviting them into your space, but the feeling of belonging means that you are home. We've asked some congregants to share their stories about sacred belonging. Some will appear in pre-recorded videos, and some will be here with us on the Bema. We'll hear some inspiring music from Cantor Simmons, have a chance to study with Rabbi Hayon, and even have a moment of stand-up comedy. Jerry Amundsen will share her thoughts on why the Sacred Belonging Initiative is important to her. And LaTanya Wilkins, who's an expert on diversity and inclusion, will reflect on the time that she has spent with the community of Congregation Emanu over the last year. Finally, we'll hear more about the Sacred Belonging Task Force and its work. By the way, if you have used our closed captioning this morning for services, you can access the closed captioning in the very same way for this program.
We hope that after the time that we spend together this afternoon, you'll reflect on the diversity of our congregation and recognize both the similarities and the differences between our congregational family. No matter the circumstances surrounding becoming a member or our individual backgrounds, each of us wants to feel a sense of sacred belonging. As Jews, we share a common bond that makes us more alike than we are different. We hope to answer questions such as, what does it mean to be part of a sacred community? In what ways do we value the experiences of people who are different from us? How can we assume and ensure that every person in our congregation is seen, included, and valued? And a few moments ago, Freddie mentioned that you'd hear a little stand-up comedy, and so with that, here's a clip highlighting the kinds of questions that Jews of color often hear.
But see, here in America, when I tell people I'm a Jew, I get one question very often. Really? Are you really Jewish? And I'm like, how am I supposed to prove it to you? Show you my snip? But there's so many questions. They're like, oh, you're Jewish. Were you born Jewish? No. I was born a baboon. And as I evolved, I realized I'm better than everybody. Followed by the next logical question. You're Jewish? Are both your parents Jewish? No. My mom's a Christian and my dad's a Muslim, and they hated each other so much, decided to raise me Jewish. And here's the thing I have noticed. All these questions that I get usually come from other Jews. It's as if they're saying, oh, you are Jewish? Hold on, first I gotta validate you. Are you really Jewish? Were you born Jewish? Are both your parents Jewish? Now here's the real story, okay? My mom was born a Hindu, married my dad who was born a Jew, converted when she got married, so I was born, they were both Jewish, which makes me a Jew. But I have stopped telling this story to any and everybody, except on stage. Here's why. Because the minute I start explaining, oh, my mom was born a Hindu, somebody will go, you're not a Jew. I'm like, hold on, Usain Bolt. Let me finish my statement. And then I go on explaining, but she converted when she got married, so they were both Jewish, I was born, so technically I'm a Jew. And they're like, I don't know, she wasn't born Jewish. I don't know if you're Jewish enough. And I'm like, really? Let's think about this for a minute. Now, do you guys know who was the first Jew? Abraham. Thank you. See, this is why I like Sunnyvale, smart crowd, because elsewhere people scream, Jesus! Just to remind me which country I'm in. Hey, welcome to America. Now, Abraham, right? And how was Abraham the first Jew? According to the story, one day he heard this voice that said, Abraham, from now on, you are a Jew. And now you guys realize I am speaking like the voice of God, right? God speaking to Abraham, right? And I don't understand why we always give God this very solid masculine voice. We don't know what God sounded like. It might have been, Abraham! You're going to be a Jew now! Right? We don't know. We don't know. But let's give God the benefit of doubt. As if we haven't done that enough already. And let's say God has a very masculine voice, right? And he's like, Abraham, from now on, you're going to be a Jew. And Abraham was like, who are you? I am God. Really? Are you really God? Were you born a God? Or were your parents God? And I guess God must have been happy. He's like, hey, look, I chose the right Jew. He's asking me all the questions. Hey, Vishnu, Rama, Krishna, come on, let's do the Hava Nagila. Yeah. So, okay, let's say Abraham was the first Jew, but then he married Sarah, not born Jewish, no Jewish parents, so obviously not a Jew. And in Judaism, the mother has to be a Jew for the son to be a Jew. Their son Isaac isn't a Jew either. So pretty much, Abraham was the first and the last Jew. The rest of us just bluffing. How about that for validation?
Kajantif, everybody, good to be with you. I'm glad that you have made this session part of your day's observances to help stir our contemplation, our exploration of big ideas, and the important process of tshuva as individuals and as a community. We're going to do a little bit of learning together this morning of some sacred text that will help us explore these ideas of sacred belonging, diversity, and inclusion. To begin, I want to remind you of something Freddie said at the beginning of our session that was very important. She said, belonging means that you are home. I think that's an important understanding of what that word means in everyday speech, but in Judaism, being at home is a very important and I'd say central, indispensable Jewish value, that our stories are all filled with the search for home. Every time we talk about our relationship to the land or the people or the words, it's all about an exploration about where it is we can make it possible for ourselves to feel home, to feel at home. And conversely, the work that we're doing today together on this session and beyond it is to see what we can do to help make our spiritual home as inclusive as possible. So we're going to look at a couple of different texts that explore ideas of diversity and inclusion in sacred text. One of the things that I talked about last night in my remarks was that just about any issue we can consider as modern people will have lots of different arguments and lots of different texts to bolster different perspectives on that idea. And the subject of diversity and inclusion is no different. All of our sacred texts from the very beginning of Jewish history until the modern era have taken as granted the fact that we live in a diverse world, that there are people who look different from us, who speak differently, speak different languages, different racial extractions, different ages, different sorts of ability. And so we tried to understand and make sense of the world's natural diversity in sacred text. So the one that we're first going to begin with this morning comes from the book of Genesis. Genesis 11, talks about a familiar story of the Tower of Babel. And here's what the text says. Everyone on earth had the same language and the same words. And they said, "Come, let us build a city and a tower with its top in the sky to make a name for ourselves, or else we shall be scattered all over the world." God came down to look at the city and the tower that they had built, and God said, "If, as one people with one language for all, this is how they have begun to act, then nothing that they may propose to do will be out of their reach. I will confound the human words down there so that they shall not understand one another's speech." That's why it was called Babel, because then God confounded their speech, and from there God scattered them over the face of the whole earth. So something missing here in the translation is the sort of Hebrew play on words, that the tower and the place was called Babel, because after that episode, God made all of their language sound like God confused people's languages so that they couldn't be able to talk to each other anymore. So the story of the Tower of Babel, again, comes with its starting point and the understanding that there is diversity in human culture, diversity in human language. Today, if you travel from one part of the earth to the other, you may not be able to understand what people are saying in the streets or in the shops. And the author of this biblical piece understood that that diversity was engineered by God as a punishment. That God was worried about what would happen in a world where everybody was too much the same, and so God changed people's languages to keep them in check, to prevent the people from being able to overtake God's authority or to get out of line and be insubordinate. So God punished them with diversity of language. Kind of a provocative and interesting starting point. Let's move to our next text, which is a Talmudic text that comes from section of the Talmud called Sanhedrin that deals with courts and courtrooms and Jewish jurisprudence, which are two words I can never say next to each other. It was taught, Rabbi Meir said, "One person is different from another in three ways: in voice, in appearance, and in thought. The difference is in voice and appearance because of marital infidelity. The difference is in thought because of robbery and theft." We need to do a little bit of unpacking of this text to understand what Rabbi Meir is saying. So just like the Tower of Babel story, Rabbi Meir comes to the stage understanding that people are different. We look different, we think different, and we talk different. So why would that be? Rabbi Meir's hypothesis is that God created diversity as a sort of necessary evil. In this text, being different from each other doesn't have a moral valence the way it did in the Tower of Babel story, in which diversity was created as a brake on human beings' ambitions. But in this sense, diversity is a necessary evil, Rabbi Meir proposes. The reason that diversity exists is to prevent adultery and theft. So we need to understand the way Rabbi Meir is thinking. So the context that will make this text comprehensible is this. People look different from each other, God reasons, according to Rabbi Meir's logic, because if everybody looked alike, you might take someone else's spouse home thinking they were yours. And so in order to prevent that kind of accidental adultery, God made people look differently, so you wouldn't accidentally take someone else's spouse home and behave with them as if they were your spouse. Similarly, God made people think differently because of robbery and theft. What's Rabbi Meir suggesting here? First of all, that we want to make sure we don't steal other people's ideas. We want to protect the rights of intellectual property. And if everybody has the same ideas, I might publish someone else's ideas and get credit and royalties for that book, even though the thoughts don't belong to me. But similarly, if we all have the same ideas, we're all going to like the same kind of clothes, we're all going to drive the same kind of car, our houses will look the same, and it would be very easy for me to take my key and take someone else's car to somebody else's house and live in their house thinking that it's mine. So Rabbi Meir suggests that everybody's thoughts and tastes were made different to make sure that we could prevent accidental adultery, robbery, and theft. Still in these texts, diversity exists, but it probably would be better if it didn't have to. In our third text, another rabbinic text, also from the same section of the rabbinic canon called Sanhedrin. This now is from the Mishnah, so it's a little bit earlier, was written a little bit earlier than the last text we just saw. Here's what the text of the Mishnah says. Some of this may sound familiar to you. Adam, the first human, was created alone in order to teach that anyone who destroys one soul in Israel is considered to have destroyed an entire world. Conversely, anyone who saves one soul in Israel is considered to have saved an entire world. Let me just pause here for 1 second. This line is quoted very often as a sort of touchstone text about how important life is in Jewish culture, that it's so important that saving one person's life is tantamount to saving the entire world. We can see in the actual text here a little bit of that tension that I talked about between universalism and particularism. Because what the original text says is not anyone who saves anyone else's life. It says anyone who saves another life in Israel is seen as though they save an entire world. So it's a little bit less touchy-feely universalist than we might like to imagine it is. The rabbis are primarily concerned with the preservation of Jewish life. But it goes on. There's another reason that Adam was created alone, for the purpose of maintaining peace among people, so that one person might not say to another, "My Father is greater than yours." This also serves to testify to the greatness of the Holy One. For when a person stamps several coins with one die, they are all similar to each other. But the supreme ruler of rulers, the Holy One of blessing, stamped all people with the seal of the first human, as all of them are his offspring, and none of them is similar to another. Therefore, since all of humanity descends from one person, every single person may say, "The world was created for me." Now we start to see a pivot in the way Jewish thought feels about diversity. Now there is a really lovely appreciation for the fact that there is diversity and variety in human life. The last slide that we saw, you'll remember, said that there's a moral reason for creating diversity, and that is that there shouldn't be sort of clan wars among human beings. There shouldn't be rivalry among people because of what their genealogy looks like, or what their last name is, or what family they're descended from. Because ultimately, the rabbis reason, we all came from the same great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather. We're all relatives, and so it doesn't make any sense to say, I deserve more respect because of what my last name is. But now, there's also this other thing here on this slide. Let's go back forward to the next one if we could. That whereas Genesis might have suggested that the Tower of Babel story might have suggested that diversity was created as a way to punish or keep people in their place. Here instead, the rabbis are suggesting that diversity is a way of God demonstrating what an amazing craftsperson God is. Because there's no person on earth who can make this sort of merchandise the way that God makes. We all have the same die, they're imagining this sort of process of stamping coins out of a die. The original die is Adam, the first man, and every person that's stamped out of that same die looks different. Imagine going to a factory where they're using the same mold to cast products, but every product that comes out of the same mold looks different. The reason for this text is to suggest that part of God's greatness is that only God can create a mold from which different products emerge. So now the Jewish understanding of diversity takes on a little bit more dimension and color. Diversity demonstrates to us how great and powerful God is, and it also helps engineer an appreciation for egalitarianism in human society, because all of us come ultimately from the same Father. This next text that we're going to look at comes from Harav Kook, Rabbi Abraham Isaac Kook, the first Ashkenazi chief rabbi of Israel. Rabbi Kook was born in the 19th century, died in the 20th century. This work that we're looking at, called Olat HaRa'ayah, this is Rabbi Kook's commentary on the prayer book, on the Siddur. And here he says something that is really captivating and fascinating about the construction of the Holy Temple, which in the classic Orthodox prayer book is referred to quite a lot, the construction of the Holy Temple. So here is what Rabbi Kook says about the construction of the temple. Just as the Holy Temple was built from different components, the truth of God, who is the light of the world, is composed from different perspectives, through which all divergent opinions become clear. For all of them are the words of the living God, despite our different approaches to prayer and study. And in this sense, all of the perspectives are aligned and do not contradict each other. For the diversity of our opinions comes from the diversity of our souls. Indeed, it enriches wisdom and causes its expansion, which affirms that it is only possible for the building of peace, that's the temple, for the building of peace to be constructed by combining a number of diverse elements that at first glance appear to oppose one another. So let's go back a slide to just remember what we're talking about. Just as the Holy Temple is built from different components, if you spend any time reading the book of Leviticus or parts of Exodus that talk about the construction of ancient Israel's worship spaces, you know that those construction projects included lots of different elements. There's wood and there's precious metal, there are valuable stones, there's silk, all kinds of different things that go in together to create a holy worship space. So Rabbi Cook is saying every time you read or imagine the construction of a holy place where Jews gather to pray, you should remember that the reflection of all those different elements in here too. Look around us. Think about the bricks and the wood, the fabric arts and the glass. All of these different elements come together to remind us of an appreciation of human diversity. And just as the space couldn't be what it is with all of those different resources, with all of their different original sources, in the same way, all of our different ideas and opinions are critical to create a community of prayer, of holiness and wholeness. It enriches wisdom, he says, and causes its expansion. All of us bring something different to our sacred community, but without what each of us brings, this place couldn't be as deep and profound as it is, which affirms that it is only possible for the building of peace to be constructed by combining a number of diverse elements that at first glance appear to oppose one another. We might think that genders stand in opposition to each other, or races stand in opposition to each other. But they're not opposing forces, he says, they're complementary forces. Just like the wood of the building complements the bricks, the thing that one person brings in their ideas and minds and spirit complements what you bring in yours. All right, and lastly, let's go to our final text here. And you can start to see now how the idea that we started with from the Tower of Babel about diversity being a punishment has started to change and be refined and evolved over the centuries of Jewish study and reflection. All right, we have now a text from Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, which is a midrashic collection of sort of fanciful, imaginative rabbinic stories about stories in the Torah. And here, the Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer is talking about the creation of Adam. You'll remember we heard that just a few minutes ago when we talked about how Adam was made alone, that the essential part of Adam's creation was that he was a solitary creation, so that there shouldn't be any wonder about who descended from whom. Here, the Midrash is focusing on a different part of Adam's creation, and that is the Torah's account of how humanity was created out of dust that God gathered from the ground. God gathered the dust to create Adam from the four corners of the earth: red, black, white, and green. Why from the four corners of the earth? So that if one travels from east to west and comes to the end of his life, no one can say to him as he prepares to depart from the world, "Your body is not made from the dust of this land as mine is. Go back to where you were created." Rather, every place that a person goes contains the dust from which they were created and to which they will return. The reason that Adam was created the way that he was, with dust gathered from different parts of the earth, is that not only is the diversity of the human family traced back to one single ancestor, but the converse is also true, that the diversity of the earth is reflective of the diversity of one individual person. So that anywhere we go, we should be able to feel at home. If the great Jewish spiritual quest of our lives is to find a place where we can come home and feel at home, that has to be reflected in the way that we relate to each other and the way that we relate to the earth in which we live. Finally, the sort of second to last line of this midrash provides us a beautiful and powerful rejoinder that all of us should keep in our pocket the next time we hear a racist say to somebody, "Go back where you came from." What the Midrash says is that you can't tell anyone to go back where they came from because all of us came from here. We're all from here. All of us are made out of the same stuff. Just as the world is diverse, that diversity is reflected in the faces of all people. No one can ever tell another person to go back where they came from. That's why God created humanity the way that God did, because all of us came from the same place, and all of us are returning to the same place as well. So I need to wrap up, but what we've seen, just to recap, over the last several slides, over the last few snapshots of Jewish text, is an evolving and changing appreciation and understanding of human diversity in the world. All of them start with the recognition that there is diversity in the world. None of them pretend to believe that all there is Jewish life and all there are Jews, but that people look differently than we do, even within the Jewish community, of course. Jews look all sorts of different ways and come from all sorts of different backgrounds. But we've changed from understanding human diversity as a punishment to a necessary evil to finally, in the end, a real great blessing that helps us appreciate the breadth and depth of what God is and what God is capable of, and also a reminder of us to stay humble, because all of us came from the same ancestor, and all of us are made of dust. So as we continue to move now into our program with a piece of music, I thank you for being here. I thank you for your reflection, and I thank you for joining me and joining us on this journey to a deeper understanding of what it means to belong, what it means to make this sacred space a place where everyone is at home. Good Joseph, everyone.
I wanted to share a piece of music that I wrote using a text that I learned from one of my beloved teachers at HUC. The text comes from Rabbi Pinchas of Koritz, and it says, "All alone, I cannot lift my voice in song. Then you come near and sing with me. Our prayers fuse, and a new voice soars. Our bond is beyond voice and voice. Our bond is one of spirit and spirit." And I know that there is something that happens when we sing together. And over this last span of time where we've had ups and downs and much time of not being able to sing together, it has been really challenging to feel like I could pray fully without my community to sing and pray with me. And so even though we are wearing masks these days, I do feel the power of being able to sing together. And there are studies that show that when groups of people sing together, that their heartbeats start to be in sync with each other. And so we're going to do a little bit of singing together today. I'm going to share this piece with you. Try it. Voice and voice, spirit and spirit, voice and voice, spirit and spirit. All alone, I cannot lift my voice in song, cannot lift my voice. Then you I can't so now we'll sing a little Hine Matov, our Jewish motto, how good it is to sit together. Hine Matov u'manayim, shevet achim kam yachad. 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 I would now like to welcome Emmanuel's president, Jerry Amundsen, for a few words about her own vision of sacred belonging.
Thank you, Cantor, for that beautiful music. Thanks, Rabbi Fixler. Thank you, Rabbi Hayon. And thank you, Freddie and Keith, for creating this program for this afternoon on the topic of sacred belonging. I normally have very prepared remarks when I speak to the congregation, but my week went sideways, and I'm working off notes, so it's going to be a little more off the cuff, but sacred belonging is something that's really important to me, and so I'm just going to speak from the heart and using my notes. You heard the definition that we was up on the screen, and Keith shared about sacred belonging, and I would add to that, or the way I think about sacred belonging is being able to bring your whole self into the door, into our synagogue, and to be seen, heard, and understood for who you are and who you are not, to be accepted and celebrated for who you are. So I was asked to speak about why I care about sacred belonging. Well, I care about sacred belonging here at Emmanuel because Emmanuel has been a very important part of my life and my family's life. Arthur and I have raised our 3 kids here. We had our wedding blessing here. We raised 3 kids here through Becker, consecration, Helfman, 3 B'nai mitzvahs, high school graduation, another one to come. We've grieved the loss of family members, a nephew, 2 parents, grandparents here, and it's always been a home away for home for me, and a place where without hesitation I could come in and be myself and find comfort. So I care about sacred belonging because I want every Jew and their family members, whether they're Jewish, Jew adjacent, or someone exploring becoming a Jew, I want them to have the same opportunity to be a part of our synagogue community. That means they can not only enter our doors, but also be seen, heard, and valued for who they are. As a member of Emmanuel and as a Jew, my dream is that everyone interested in belonging to Emmanuel has the opportunity to find a home here like I have. I care about sacred belonging because I know everyone has had a moment in their life when they felt excluded or out of place. I know I have. And if you think about that particular moment or time, a lot of us go back to high school moments when you felt really out of place. And imagine if you felt like that every time you walked into your place of worship. That's heart-wrenching to me, and that's why I care about sacred belonging. Over the past few years, we've listened to stories. I've heard some of them firsthand from Jews of colors who felt pushed away from their synagogues and communities, and including here at Emmanuel, and this is the last place someone should feel excluded or marginalized. I care about sacred belonging because we're a faith community, and our faith community here at Emmanuel should be a place where Jews and their family members are valued and celebrated, not in spite of who they are, but because of their differences. It's the first place that Jews should be able to share themselves fully, where they can find connection to clergy, to their faith, and their peers. Because our Jewish community is made richer, like Rabbi Hayon spoke of, from an inclusive community, one where people from diverse demographics, whether they're non-white, disabled, or an at-risk social group, that enriches our lives. And I care about sacred belonging because I want my oldest child, Penny, who is transgender, to have the opportunity to belong here, to connect with her faith, to God, to her friends, peers, and family, to feel like she is a stakeholder in her synagogue. And she doesn't live in Texas anymore, but I wonder, I worry, what will her experience be at Emmanuel? She was at Becker, Helfman, Bar Mitzvah. She graduated here. It was a part of her journey. And as a young adult, now that, can she see herself here? Will she be valued for the remarkable Jew she is? Can she trust our synagogue? Can she trust us to let her express who she is and to accept her? Can she feel like she's a stakeholder here? Can she find a seat at the table here? And I wonder that about any marginalized demographic group. Being a part of her gender journey has been a remarkable privilege for Arthur and me, and a source of great personal growth. I care about sacred belonging because I believe our lives are enriched by sharing them with others who are or seem different than ourselves. And then I'd like to cut and paste Rabbi Hayon's text study in there right now. So that's why I care about sacred belonging. This past year, over several months, our Board of Trustees have been engaged in some important work toward building a sense of sacred belonging at Emmanuel. It's uncomfortable work, and we've been guided beautifully in this work by a DEI facilitator from Chicago, LaTanya Wilkins, and now I am delighted to introduce a recorded message from LaTanya.
Hi, LaTanya.
Hey, Rabbi Fixler, how are you?
I'm good. It's been a year since you and I started having conversations. Our first conversations were when we were talking about you coming into Yom Kippur last year to lead us in a session on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the ways that our congregation might think about that. And through that time, then through the year, you've done some work with us, with the board, with helping us to think broadly about how we do belonging and sacred belonging here at Emmanuel. And I'm just so glad you're in our world.
Yes, it's been such an honor and a privilege to work with you. So, me too.
So say a little bit, I'm curious, you had never worked with a synagogue before, and you are not, spoiler alert, Jewish. And say a little bit about what you thought coming in about what this work might be with us.
Yeah, so I will admit that you're not a typical client, and I probably wouldn't work with just any synagogue. A congregant had asked me if this is something that I would do. This person I've known for a long time. I have a lot of Jewish friends, and so I've always, even though I'm not Jewish, I've always had a high respect and honor for the Jewish faith. And so when you came to me, it was, I think we were like right smack in the middle of the pandemic. And the reason why I did this is because I wanted to help. I wanted to help, especially a place that is a place of worship and a place where a place where it's spiritual. And where there is sacred belonging. And we talked about that where, and it's important to me because I never really experienced a lot of sacred belonging in the spaces that I were in, especially the faith-based places I was in. So yeah, it's a culmination of many different things. Those are the biggest reasons.
So we keep using the term sacred belonging, and that's sort of the theme of this day. And that's actually a term that you and I sort of coined together. And I'm curious if you could say a little bit about like what that means to you. This isn't a phrase that exists outside of Emmanuel yet until we start telling people about it. But when you say sacred belonging, what do you mean?
Yeah, spoiler alert, I'm gonna write something with Josh about this someday, so hold us to it. But when I heard sacred belonging for the first time, it made me think about the metaphor or the visualization that we all have equity in God's eyes, right? And so when you walk into a room and you walk into anything faith or spirituality based, it's the belonging is sacred in the way that it's so special. And again, it's transcendent of humans, right? You belong in this way that is, it's not really tangible. You just know it's in your body. And it's something that sacred belonging is something that it's hard to articulate, but not only is it not tangible, it's something that you embody, or when you're giving it or you're receiving it, you know it's there. And so that's how I would describe it. Again, I think there are a lot of experiences that I had in my life that were like, access to God is not for everyone, right? Some people are special. Some people have more access, and there's not a lot of equity there. And so when I hear sacred belonging, I see that everyone, no matter what the flaws, belongs.
I love that, and I love that you've helped us to sort of frame that why this work is particularly important inside a synagogue and inside a faith community. So you've been helping us with these conversations for a year and getting to know us a lot better than you did a year ago. And I would love to hear you just reflect on what have you seen in the work we've done? What have you learned? What surprised you in how a synagogue might approach this work?
I will start with what I observed, and I will tell all of you, even if you haven't been involved in this work, it was real. And I'm writing a book. It's actually done, and it comes out next month. It's called Leading Below the Surface, and so how to build real psychologically safe relationships with people who are different from you. And I did feel like everything we did was below the surface. The number one thing that will stick with me for a long time were house meetings and doing house meetings with Jews of color. And I had mentioned this to you, Josh, where, again, just because I'm not Jewish doesn't mean I didn't know exactly what people were feeling in those spaces. Again, when you feel like you don't belong. And what was beautiful is people that weren't Jews of color just listened, and they let them be messy. And we got off schedule, and that's how it is. That's what real relationships are. And I call that getting in the muck, in the human muck. And we did that. And I remember after one of those sessions, just hanging up and just crying. And it was during the time again where we were kind of all shut in, and systemic racism was plastered everywhere around me. And I just thought it was beautiful that Jews of color could talk about this. And it was so non-judgmental. And again, no one was trying to control anything. I knew that this was going to go beyond the 3 months that we said, but I was willing to do that because I knew this was going to be a real change. And it's so important. It's so important. And it's especially in faith communities, because that's where people spend a lot of their time there. That's where people learn their values, right? And those are the principles that people live for every day in their lives. And so seeing that and seeing this be an avenue for that was very special. One more thing I will mention is Rabbi Hayon, him doing this work for, again, this is not performative. It's It's real stuff. And he never plastered it. He just kind of came out like slowly, and that's how you know. And so, do you still have some work to do? Yeah, but I will tell you that this is the clergy that you want to have if you want this to work.
That's really sweet. That got me right in the feelings. Well, so one of the things about our relationship here, Samaya and Tanya, is my job is to constantly teach you a new Jewish concept or phrase. So this being Yom Kippur. One of the practices of Yom Kippur is that you're supposed to take what's called a cheshbon hanefesh, an accounting of your soul. You're supposed to look back through your year and think, what have you done well and what could you do better? And so, and usually that's an internal and personal process, but I'm curious because you have this interesting role as sort of the outsider who's gotten to know us well. If you could take a second and give us your sense of our cheshbon hanefesh, what's going great and where do you see as places where we can still grow as a community in this work?
So what's going great is awareness and commitment. I do see a lot of awareness. I see that people are actively and voluntarily participating and that people are bought in and they want to be a part of this. As far as moving forward, it's the same with anyone I work with as a coach. It's really finding ways to keep this going, building in the structures and systems to make sure that we do build spaces of sacred belonging. And again, it's the stuff that's on the surface and like stuff that's below the surface. And the surface kind of stuff, like we talked about this a bit, and I hope it's okay that I'm mentioning this, Josh, but making sure that Jews of color walk in and feel like they belong. And the way that we've understood the way that people feel like they belong is they look around and there's Jews of color on the walls, right? There's Jews of color that are greeting them. There's people are coming up and they're not suspicious of them being there, right? And that's going to take time, right? It's, a lot of times, historically, if there weren't a lot of Jews of color around and probably a lot of pictures on the wall that are not, that don't represent. So that's like the first thing, like the surface stuff. And then getting deeper and really understanding what experiences people are still having. And how do you do that? Well, you observe, you let things be messy. Like you talk about these things and you let it be messy and you incorporate it in your services. You incorporate it in everything you do.
I love that, and I love that we have both that surface level work and that under the surface level work that we need to do, that we're continuing to do, and that we're doing in part because we've learned some of how we do that from you, and we're really grateful to you for that. As we wrap up, is there anything you've learned in doing this work with your first synagogue client, maybe not your last, I don't know, that you have brought to your broader practice? I mean, you do this a ton in your coaching and your consulting work. Anything you've learned from us that's been helpful?
Yeah, I talk about all of you a lot. I think one of the things that I learned and that you've taught me as a client of mine is that it's okay to not, to go off script, to not have a project that goes exactly in order. And I think that's a big thing you taught me, and really getting deeper with my clients. I remember when we started, I got COVID and everybody prayed for me, and I was able to share that with all of you, and there was no judgment, and it was just prayer, and I felt I was actually concerned about sharing that with my clients, and then when I was able to share that, it just felt like it kind of took me into a different territory with people I work with, and just trusting that that's how things should go, because that's what I talk about, that's what I tell people to do, and I actually did it, and it worked. And so accepting that. The other thing that I learned is that people are just doing their best, and they really want to do this, and so being able to have grace in this work.
I love it, and I do think there was so much pressure, 2 summers ago that was like, we have to do this work and we have to do it now. And luckily, our congregation was already engaged in those conversations and has been for a while. And we're inspired by Rabbi Hayon's High Holy Day sermon a couple of years ago. But I think trying to cultivate that grace, trying to cultivate that loving kindness for where you are in your own journey and where other people are in their journey is part of how we do this in a really sacred way.
Mhm.
So, I mean, we are so grateful to you. We're such big fans of you and the work that you do in this world and the justice and the love that you bring into this world. And if people want to learn more about you, they're going to check out Leading Beneath the Surface.
It's leadingbelowthesurface.com.
I was so close.
Yeah, you were close.
Leadingbelowthesurface.com
Yeah.
by Latanya Wilkins. It's coming out soon.
Yeah, I hope to hear from all of you, and I hope to hear about your journeys and how things are going, because, again, it's in these communities where change happens. And, a lot of times when people, like I said, I do a lot of keynotes. That's what I was talking a little bit about earlier. And people talk about, it's hard for me to do this stuff at work because, I do it at work but I want to do it in all aspects of my life. And so I would love to hear how you're doing this in other aspects of your life and outside of work, because that's where it really makes the difference, like different neighbors and going out of your way to have your kids play with different kinds of people. And those types of things make a huge difference.
Well, we're just so grateful for you being our teacher and appearing 2 Yom Kippurs in a row in helping us to expand what it means to celebrate Yom Kippur. We say, Gamar Chatima Tova, may you be sealed for a good year. I know your year isn't starting right now, but the next 12 months, may you be sealed for a lot of blessing and health and continued work of love and justice.
Thank you, Josh.
When Jacob awakes from his dream of angels ascending and descending the ladder to the heavens, he declares, Ma norah hamakom hazeh. How amazing is this place, and I didn't even know it. What he learned on that morning is that any place can be awe-inspiring, but it matters who comes. It is norah if we make it so. On Yom Kippur, we are supposed to act like angels. Like the angels descending the ladder, we come to this place, whether in person or virtually, to fill it with our gifts and our love, and to value the offerings that other people bring. And in that way, we can truly say, Ma norah hamakom hazeh, how amazing is this place that we build together.
How many voices make a chorus? How many choices lie before us? The work we've come to do is so important. So if we asked you, would you join us? How amazing is this place? We can fill this holy space with holy sounds as
only if we make it. This future's ours, but only if we take it. So when you do bring all of you, and you will be enough, 'cause we are asking you to join us. Menorah, how amazing is this place? We can fill this holy space with holy sounds as we gather round.
I have been a member for approximately 45 years.
My name is Patricia Baker, and I've been connected to Emmanuel now for 33 years.
My name is Melanie Candler Little. I am a Jew. I have been connected with Congregation Emmanuel for 34 years, actually. So it's all I've known all my life. I'm Carol Laufer.
And I'm Leo Boucher.
So you've been members about?
It's under 20 years, but not by a lot. I'm married in.
My first Yom Kippur service was on September 21st of 1988. A coworker and I had been discussing the High Holy Days for, prior weeks, and he invited me to accompany him to the services, and I accepted immediately. After having attended several services, I found him to be really supportive and in answering questions that I had and making suggestions and checking out books for me to read, etc. So I've been with Emmanuel for quite some time now.
The thing that keeps me connected to Emmanuel is the sense of community that I do feel with the people who are part of my tribe, as well as a shared memory with people that I have, shared memories in general that I have with the people that I've shared my whole life with.
My nuclear family had no family in Houston. So we learned our friends became our family. And so that's what's happened with us at Emmanuel. Our friends are part of our family. And walking in is returning home to my family.
The thing that I like most about Judaism and Emmanuel, Judaism, per se, is that it's oriented toward this life, this world, in a very real way. To me, it gives me a guide to live by, a system for me to live by. In other words, it keeps me focused on my ethical values like love and empathy and ethical values. And it helps me to find peace in my life.
As a family, we celebrate holidays together. As a family, we, all through the pandemic, we attended virtual services every Friday night. I think that was kind of an anchor for us during the pandemic.
It touches my life in many aspects daily, from the prayers that I pray on a daily basis, both alone or with my husband, it affects how I interact with people. And it's just a part of like my daily interactions. There's no separating Judaism from my life, and to where I could say like, oh, this is a separate aspect or anything like that. It's just a part of me, period.
My calendar has always gone by the Jewish holidays. So it's hard to do that and not be connected.
I think when I woke up the morning after my conversion, I felt wonderful. I was excited and ready to go. The truth is, I felt Jewish without even having lived Jewishly, okay? So I went out and I bought Shabbat candles, I bought a mezuzah, I bought wine, everything else needed for the upcoming Shabbat. And I cleaned my house, I bought flowers for the table. And as I stood before my table and admired how lovely it was, I felt this wonderful sense of pride. And when I lit my candles for the first time to say the blessings, without making a mistake or without forgetting it, I felt really blessed.
I think one of the memories that I always come back to was at Hannah's bat mitzvah, when there's a point in the service where the rabbi speaks to the bat mitzvah. And I remember Rabbi Silk speaking to Hannah directly in such a meaningful, moving way that really showed that she had spent time with Hannah and knew Hannah and understood Hannah and understood something about her. And that is one of the things that I will always remember. And I think it made me feel very connected at that moment.
My years of preparation for my bat mitzvah were extremely meaningful to me, as well as the act of making my bat mitzvah, especially in hindsight. You know, I think that at 13 years old, I wasn't always present in the experience, but at the same time, I understood on some level the gravity of what I was doing, and I wanted to do my best in that situation. But it was a beautiful experience for me, a time of connection, a time of growth and pride, and that was something that was extremely impactful in my life.
When I joined the volunteer choir, I felt a sense of belonging. I enjoyed singing, and I was looking for something that I could do that would give me a sense of belonging, a sense of inclusion and acceptance, and also a source of social support.
Something else that was extremely meaningful for me was to be blessed at temple before my wedding. And the process of preparing for a Jewish wedding ceremony was one of the most exciting, as well as, again, impactful experiences. My husband and I worked with Rabbi Fixler to participate in premarital education classes, and we were able to work out what the possibilities would be for a life, for my husband, who is not Jewish, living with a Jewish woman and making Judaism a part of my home, which we do very actively. And the experience of showing him the beauty of what I had experienced my whole life, I think has drawn him in.
I get around the temple using a 3-wheel scooter, so I cannot climb stairs. And when I'm at home, I use a motorized wheelchair. So I have very little use of my legs, and That is why I'm so interested in making things easier for the disabled. I don't know if you've seen this month's bulletin. I recommend it to everyone. If you haven't read it yet, you can find it on the website. Just a little advertisement. There are multiple articles about different accommodations that Emmanuel has done over the years to accommodate people with physical disabilities. People may know because we have a big sign outside the door that we have a hearing loop system for the hearing impaired. Do people know we have a lift to get the disabled up to the tallest bima in the sanctuary? I think that's a well-kept secret. We have lower mezuzahs for people in wheelchairs. We have closed captioning at all the high holiday services and Friday night services too. And our chapel will have a ramp that will allow people with mobility issues to access the bima. Thank you to everybody who worked on that, especially to the Proler Fund and the anonymous donor and the inclusion committee and the building committee and everybody who made it happen. When I see these accommodations that the community has spent time on, in some cases spent a lot of money, I have a place there. I've been seen. They want me to be able to light candles or read from the Torah.
There were people that was very welcoming, and there were people that were just curious, I guess. And then there were those that was just cold, as I said, looked at me and like, what are you doing here? Or that type of thing. But because I was determined and because I wanted so badly to convert, I just continued with what I was doing as positively as I could. I got, believe it or not, some negative feedback from not just a few of the Jewish people, congregants, I guess I should say, but I got some negative feedback from minorities as well.
I could echo the same thing because I didn't grow up here in Houston. And clearly there's like a whole inner, families that have known each other, families that are like really extensive, and then they've married each other. So it's like super involved. And I definitely don't feel part of that at all. There's like conversations about how things have always been some way. And it's like, it doesn't resonate for me.
Rabbi Fixler asked something similar in a meeting regarding sacred belonging. And it was something to the tune of, has there ever been a time that you felt you didn't belong in temple? And my response was, every time I set foot in temple. And there are those who, when I was a girl of 7 years old, would ask me questions like, how are you Jewish? And what are you doing here? Why are you here? And at 7 years old, do I know how to answer that question? No. There were times when I would be in temple and people would just turn and stare at me. And as a little girl, can you imagine how that felt?
We had seen at one of the URJ conventions for the Mishaberach, or they spread out a huge tallis-like cloth and invited people from the congregation to come and stand under it. And when I hear Hashkivenu, that's what I always think of, is the covering. And it was so moving that when we came back to Emmanuel during Yom Kippur Afternoon, there were those who were in charge of planning, and they decided to spread out a very, very large tallis and invite people under the tallis, except it was on the bima. And some of us couldn't get to it. And that just seemed so counterintuitive. Who needs healing more than people who can't get to the tallis? It made me feel unseen. It made me feel like people just didn't get it. What reality is. It can be humiliating. It can be embarrassing. I didn't feel like I belonged.
I would come to Hebrew school on Wednesday nights and get there a bit early. And there was one of the staff that would sit with me and two friends of mine, and we would read the parashah for that week and try and, have a discussion and talk about it. I'm, 14, 15 years old, don't really understand Shakespeare, let alone Torah. And so I was like, let's do this. This is important. And I just remember one day in the middle of a discussion on Torah, this staff member asked me in front of my two friends who were both white, why do Black people use the N-word? And I was like, I don't use that word. And I felt so just like I had been hit with a baseball bat because of that, that you'd never heard me use that word. You've never seen me behaving in a manner in which would indicate that I am a student that didn't care about things or whatever was the thought that went along with that, and why would you ask me that in the middle of studying Torah in front of my two friends? Because look, the result was that it was to separate me from them and to make me and make them see that, I was different.
Getting people who are maybe different in some way and have something else to bring to the community. Get them involved, talk to them. I make myself very visible just by being as involved as I am. And as my husband continues to remind me, it's people remember me because I have a scooter, I have a wheelchair or whatever. And which always surprises me. I don't think of it myself that way. But it's important for the congregation to see that I'm visible and I'm involved and I belong there. And if you're going to be welcoming, you've got to make it easy to get in the door.
Around that, I would say sort of acknowledging that there are Jews who are atheists and or agnostic. I mean, that doesn't seem odd to me. I mean, I look at my family, and that's certainly, I think I'm a product of the environment that I was raised in. And I think that probably both my kids, we certainly don't like teach them this is the way, but it's right. It's sort of a way of talking about things and thinking about things. And it definitely, I can pass, right? I can pass. Like, you don't look at me and think, oh, now there goes an agnostic, or there goes an atheist. I had just assumed that there were lots of people like me. And maybe there are.
I want to acknowledge it takes time to get to know people, but those that were willing to be open and to becoming friends, that was something that was very important. And just the level of willingness that people showed in regards to just welcoming a new member, and then also beyond welcoming me, there were times when our family was invited for break the fast, times that we've had the same celebration and invited other people, and were able to play host to other people's experience of Judaism, which was beautiful. So in regards to a sense of belonging and how do people create that, it's just sharing in the Jewish experience, and whatever that looks like, spending time with people, possibly even outside of temple.
If there's one person who can't access what they need to access, that we're not being a sacred, welcoming, belonging community.
In our temple, I have come to believe that temple is a model for the rest of society. And Rabbi Fixler talked about Jewish teachings and the things that we learn about taking care of other people. And I would say that my friends and so many of the teachers that instructed me throughout Hebrew school were so wonderful and supportive. And why can't it begin with us? There are so many difficult things going on today. And sometimes I just hesitate to even turn on the news or listen because it's so heartbreaking. And I think that let it begin with us.
I want to welcome our live panel today, and I want to just say to each of you, several of us have only met through Zoom or video, and it's a great honor and privilege to spend time with you in person today, and thank you for being here. Why don't we take a moment and just introduce yourself and talk about when you became connected to Emanu?
I'm Liz Davidson. I first started coming around Emanu about a little over 2 years ago. My wife and I were at Pride and saw a group of LGBT Jews, and I started wondering, okay, well, what do Jews think about? I mean, obviously these Jews are okay with being with queer people, but what's a broader perspective? And so I started doing some Googling, and then one day just Googled, trans accepting or trans-positive synagogues in Houston, and there was only one Google result. I have since done that again, and there's all kinds of other ones, but apparently for some reason we were meant to come here. So.
Great.
I'm Larry Barmeyer, and I wrote down some thoughts and so forth, and my feeling is that each congregant of this synagogue arrives with a unique background when they join, expecting and hoping to have their religious and spiritual needs met and to feel as if they truly are welcome and that they belong. Being invited to be part of this panel, I was asked to help the congregation learn from the past and present as to how to make this goal a reality for the future. I became a member in 1984, but my husband was told he could only become a member when he went through conversion, which he completed in 1987, which ironically is a couple of weeks before Pat Candler Baker had done hers. And when he then went to apply for membership, we were informed that a same-sex couple did not meet the definition of what a family constituted at Emmanuel, and he was only eligible to have a separate, single membership like mine. In 1982, when Donna and I were planning our religious ceremony, our marriage ceremony, I came to Emmanuel to meet with a rabbi about officiating for us. The exact reply that I received was that I needed to think of Judaism as a big house, the door to the room of marriage, shut and locked to us forever. With the help of another Houston rabbi, we did celebrate our wedding on October 3rd, 1982, and on August 18th, 2014, we were married in New Mexico by a conservative rabbi who was an active proponent of same-sex marriage and who, with his joint efforts with others in front of the state legislature, made this a reality. Around 1990, when we were beginning the adoption process, we spoke with a different Emmanuel rabbi about writing a reference letter for us. The response was that we needed to have a session with a specific psychiatrist to determine what the emotional and psychological impact on this child would be having same-sex parents before that rabbi would consider writing it. We did as asked, and the doctor asked us halfway through the session if we intended to raise the unborn child to be gay or straight. Needless to say, we found other resources for the required letter. In 1995, when Don asked again why we couldn't have one family membership, they said they would bill us however we wanted to be billed. Again, still not considering us as a family unit. I cite these true experiences only as educational tools for going forward. Fortunately, we are living in a world of more tolerance and acceptance and inclusion today, so we hope that the current and future generations will not have to endure the discrimination which we encountered. I participated in many synagogue activities and on some committees, eventually being social action chair and therefore a board member for 3 years. Our son and daughter celebrated consecration, bar and bat mitzvah, confirmation, and Helfman High School graduation here. The influence of Judaism in our family is exemplified by the fact that our son, Benji, made Aliyah in 2015 so that he could become a lone soldier in the IDF for 2 years, where he met his wife, Noah. They have been living in Houston since 2020, have established their own Jewish home, and are actually welcoming their first child, our grandson, very soon. Bezrat Hashem, he will celebrate his Brit Milah right here as his first Jewish experience. Our daughter, Michelle, who, thank God, is here with me today, spent 2 summers in Israel and then attended Reichman IDC Herzliya University from 2016 until her completion this summer for her undergraduate degree, arriving home in mid-August. I am happy to say that our perseverance and merely being present, visible, and an active part of this Jewish community, we have reached our point of feeling a sacred belonging here at Congregation Emmanuel Houston.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tulin Yoburn. My family and I have been members for 10, 12 years. we have 3 young daughters, my husband and I, and they all went through the Becker School program and absolutely loved it. And that was kind of my entry point to becoming more involved in the synagogue. It sort of evolved from volunteering in the classroom to being present at Becker events, and then I had the honor of being serving as the PTO president for 3 years, and now I have the privilege of being on various committees with the temple. But something that many people may not know about me is that I'm a Jew of color. My father is African American and a practicing Buddhist, and my mom was a white Ashkenazi Jew, so I was raised Jewish, but my entire life I had these 2 separate parts of me that I couldn't figure out how they could coexist. And I know that sounds strange, but most of my life I kind of grappled with those feelings. And I was involved in a URJ meeting not that long ago, and someone used the term Jews of color. And it was just a light bulb moment for me. It was something that, absolutely resonated with me and I can identify as, and, something that used to create all of these feelings of anxiety suddenly created a sense of calm. And I'm really proud to be here in this space right now.
Right, thanks so much. And Liz, is there a time that sticks out as being something where you felt particularly blessed to be part of the Jewish community or part of Emmanuel?
Last year, getting married, right there.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It was our 3rd date. We had originally planned to get married in May, and then had to push it back because the world had ended. And then, so we were going to get married in June, and had to push it back because the world had ended. And then finally, the world was starting to open up again in August, and about a week before, we got the word that we could do it we could have it here inside the building and not outside in the Houston heat. So that was a particular blessing that we were able to have air conditioning.
Thank you. And Tulin, what about you?
I have had these spontaneous, organic interactions with people in the congregation, and created friendships and relationships that have lasted years, and I won't be surprised if they last the rest of my life. But, in Houston, it's tricky to play the real estate game, right? And we worked really hard to find the neighborhood where we live now, and we love where we are. It's a very tight-knit community. And everyone likes to celebrate, or decorate, I should say, for the holidays. And people go all out to the extent that I can't get out of my driveway between November and January because there's like parades of cars trying to look at the neighborhood. And there are awards that go along with, most whimsical, children's favorite, best door decoration. And so lo and behold, Jesse and I had, decorated our yard all Hanukkah, like a huge sign that said, keep the shalom, or shalom y'all, and Han Solo cutout that said, keep the Han in Hanukkah as he holds a menorah, and dancing dreidels on the fence, and we just wanted to have fun. And we woke up one morning and saw a first place prize in our lawn, and we were shocked and really excited that we had won that, and the prize was for most religious, and wow, okay, cloud 9. And it lasted about a week until someone in our neighborhood hand-delivered a letter to us that was not anonymous, but it essentially said, how dare you? How dare you win first prize for most religious when everyone knows that this is the season where we celebrate my Savior's birth? And I was so taken aback that someone could go out of their way to tell me that my religion is less than. And so it's this sort of contradiction, because that was my home, that is my home, and we chose it, but so is Congregation Emmanuel. And all of my experiences here have been warm and genuine and supportive and loving and just so amazing. So I'm glad that my home here at Emmanuel has sort of made up for some that has been lacking in the neighborhood that we chose.
And Larry, are there ways in which you think your experience of sacred belonging could be enhanced here?
As I was saying, I think that we have reached that point, thank goodness, but it took a long time. It took nearly 40 years already. And even though we had a lot of virtual punches and kicks and so forth, we ended up just sticking with it and figured that by just being present, living our lives, being part of committees and part of this Jewish community, getting involved with things, me working at the food pantry, the clothing center, and so forth, and doing home visits for those particular, as part of the group that Emmanuel is part of in the South Main Corridor, just living our lives and just being present. And then once we had our children and so forth. But I feel that it has to be, rather than people just giving, just by words only, it has to be from the heart. You can't just do, lip service and say, hey, we want to make you part of this and so forth. You have to actually not call attention to the differences, but just welcome the people for whom they are.
Thank you. Freddie, do you want to add anything about it? Okay. Liz, how about yourself? Any ways we could enhance your experience of sacred belonging in Emmanuel?
Like you said, it's a matter of just being here and living our lives. When I first started, when my wife and I, Leah, we first started coming, little things like, going into the bathroom and I get a wide-eyed response, just, oh, what are you doing here? Not verbalized, but, that's like a common experience for a trans woman. But then as, I've been here, I was like, oh, Liz is here all the time, go away. Liz is here too much. And so just as we, being a part of the community requires us to be willing to be a part of the community and for others in the community to be open to bringing new people in. I think that the big challenge is not just, how do I enter your community, or how do you welcome me into your community, but how do we build a community together, and how do we create a new space?
So I'm going to ask you a follow-up question on that. You know I was going to get you, Liz. Help me understand what that means. How would we do that? Those are great words, but what would be helpful to make that sort of community? When we heard LaTanya talk about if our walls had pictures of Jews of color, are there ways that we could make that more belonging space for you?
One of the things that all three of us had talked about going into this was, doing Black History Month things, but, not just during February, or, don't, as has been my personal experience in many places besides this, don't trot out the visibly queer people just during June. I exist in July too. So having, having people, Jews of color on the walls, having Jews of color throughout the calendar, and queer Jews throughout the calendar. And so it's not this is where we can relegate you to, and we can think about you during this time, but we're just, people become part of the fabric of life.
Thanks.
Great. Again, I want to thank you all so much for sharing with us in person, and it's been a great honor to be here together with all of you in person, and look forward to many more times again, God willing.
Thank you all so much for being
Thank you for
vulnerable and
including us.
honest and open.
Thank you so much. This was a special special space, and I appreciate it.
Thanks.
My name is Lisa Brooks. I've been a member of Congregation Emmanuel for 53 years, which is not my whole life, but pretty darn close. My parents joined when I was a child so that I could go to religious school.
Hi, my name is Daisy Sarabrin. I am Lisa's daughter, and I have been a part of Emmanuel my whole life. It was a lot bigger when I was actually participating in religious school, and I was a TA, and so it was every Sunday, Wednesday, and I would go to services once in a while on Fridays, and we would celebrate Shabbat Friday nights at home when we didn't go to services. But now being in college, I have yet to do anything with Hillel, but I have signed up for some stuff with Hillel for Yom Kippur.
I would consider that Judaism has a pretty significant part of in my life right now because I am a teacher at Emmanuel. I teach several days a week, in fact, at Emmanuel. And just as a person, it's become more and more important to me the more I've learned about the religion from being a teacher. Teachers always learn from their students, and that's definitely true. A particularly meaningful or profound Jewish experience was when I had the opportunity to travel with a group of educators from across Houston on the Barish Educators trip to Israel, the inaugural trip. And getting to be in Israel with fellow teachers and educators was a phenomenal experience. I did not know well a lot of the people I was traveling with, and I got to know a whole bunch of new people and to experience Israel, many people for the first time, but to experience it as an educator was just extra special.
I think so far the most meaningful thing for me was going through the bar and bat mitzvah experience with Dina. We're just so close when we're together that it was really nice to be able to share that experience with her.
We used to have at Emmanuel occasional, I think it was monthly or maybe quarterly, Shabbat dinners for children and their families in younger grades. And Dina and Daisy first met when they were 5. And Dina's mother, Isla Hours, was there with Dina. And I believe her father, Peter, may he rest in peace, was there as well. And I saw someone else with a Chinese daughter who didn't seem to know anyone. So I went up and introduced myself and invited them to sit with us. And Daisy and Dina, by the end of the evening, were best friends and kind of continued for the rest of their lives. And I'm very, very close still with Dina's mother, Isla. And unfortunately, her father passed away a couple of years after we met, but he was a wonderful, wonderful man. But Dina and Daisy remain close. I think that feeling like you belong in a community is really, really important. And when I approached the Hours family, I had in mind making them comfortable and feeling like they belong there. So the idea of belonging and being part of a community is very important. when I was a teacher and Daisy and Dina were teaching assistants, another teaching assistant often referred to Daisy as Dina or Dina as Daisy. And I said, Daisy's the one who is my daughter. She's a teaching assistant in whatever class it was. And the teaching assistant I was speaking to said, well, they look exactly alike. I just get them confused. And I would say the only way that Daisy and Dina look alike is that they are both from China. Dina has very light skin. Daisy has very dark skin. Dina is tall. She's shaped like a runner. Daisy is not as tall, and she's more curvy. They really, truly don't look anything alike. They're just both from China. It landed with me as something that was uneducated, unobservant, someone who really just saw them as the Chinese girls and not who they were. And that as a parent of a child of a different race than my own, it made me feel a little bit sad, awkward, like we have a lot of work to do as a community of the United States to educate people, and looking at people for who they are as people and not for the outward appearances. There were other times that the same or something very similar happened, and it always hit me the same way. When someone says something like that and you're unprepared for it, it's hard to know what to say or to do on the spot. So I think just we have a big job to do in educating people in general about your peoplehood is in your soul and in your personality. It's not in how you appear. I think that I feel a particular sense of belonging at Emmanuel when I walk down the hall and I know most of the people who I encounter in the hallways. Emmanuel is a huge congregation, but the people who attend regularly, the people who are involved, the children who I've taught, their parents, I know a lot of people and I feel very much a part of the community.
I think just in general, Friday night services, when everybody who goes is all together, I feel a sense of belonging.
My hopes for Daisy as she embarks on this new adventure in her life, and she and I have talked about this some, is for her to be able to find her people, things she has in common with others that form the lasting friendships. I know for me in college, I got to be friends with the people on my first year hall. However, when I got deeply involved in theater production as a props master, as a costume stitcher, as a set builder, as a stage manager, I formed life friendships. And those are the kind of friendships where you have a shared experience around something you love and something you have in common with someone. No matter what your background is, you love this one thing and you look forward to being together with those friends. And Daisy, I hope that you will be able to find those people and those friendships and that passion that will bind you together as friends for the rest of your life.
Hi, hello, I'm Lauren Ziff. And I'm Leah Madoff, and we're the co-chairs of the Sacred Belonging Task Force at Emmanuel. The Sacred Belonging Task Force was formed out of several conversations we had with congregants of different backgrounds, as well as conversations with staff, clergy, and lay leaders at Emmanuel. Through these conversations, we found that there's a lot of work to do to help all congregants feel a sense of belonging within and outside the walls of our congregation.
Our task force held our first meeting a few weeks ago, and we look forward to refining our goals, which we aim to accomplish this year and beyond. We will look at all areas of our congregation, including but not limited to the Helfman Religious School, Becker, Emmanuel Greeters, security, and more. We know the work of sacred belonging is ongoing, and we strive to listen with open hearts to the needs of all congregants. I just want to say thank you to everyone who's spoken today with such vulnerability and so beautifully, the panel as well as the speakers. We welcome comments and suggestions directed to our email, which is racialjustice@emmanuelhouston.org. People can look forward to more communication and opportunities to participate as the task force gets off the ground. Wishing you a healthy and happy 5782.
I want to echo Lauren's comments about how grateful we are to all of the people who shared their experiences, some of whom are in the room, some of whom are watching online, and also not just for this program, but who have engaged with us in house meetings and one-on-one conversations over the last 6 or 8 months that allowed us to bring today's program to you and to speak to the themes. I want to give a particular extra gratitude to David Tanner, who was up many late nights editing those videos. We are so grateful for the beauty that you gave us, and we are grateful to Keith Remmels and Freddie Bleeker-Franks for their leadership in shaping today. It is really their vision that made today possible. I've been thinking about that story that Lisa just told about Daisy and Dina being confused for each other. For over 50 years, scientists have demonstrated experimentally that our brains recognize faces of our own races more readily than faces of other races. They call this finding the other race effect. Babies as young as 3 months old already react more strongly to faces of their own race, and this effect only strengthens as we grow. So when a person says to Lisa, they look the same to me, it is not out of some brokenness in their heart. It is out of a demonstrable cognitive process in their brain. And yet, that does not absolve us of trying to be better. If sacred belonging is rooted in people coming to this place and feeling seen, included, and valued, then we have to do better. We have to learn to look at people, to really see them, to listen to their experiences and value their contributions. This is what we learned from Rabbi Hayon today, the value that comes from diverse perspectives and life experiences contributing to our community. Diversity is not a bug or a curse, it's a vital feature. That like the ancient temple, we build this community with the blessings of our diverse and complementary materials. And we have seen demonstrated the hurt that comes when people feel unseen, when they feel othered. We heard Melanie's story of feeling so alone when someone said something racially insensitive to her. We heard Larry's story of having doors of Jewish life closed in his face. We heard Lisa's shock at having Daisy confused with Dina. We heard Jerry's fear that when her daughter comes back to this temple that has been her home, will she feel seen, heard, and valued? And we heard what it feels like to be known and included. To feel, as Jerry said, like you are a stakeholder with a seat at the table. We heard Karen's story of feeling like people want her to light candles and read Torah from her bima. We heard that she feel what it feels like to know that there will be a ramp that makes that possible. We heard Leo and Carol talk about the power of seeing their children blessed at their B'nai Mitzvah and seeing that they were truly known. We heard Tulin talk about feeling more at home and affirmed here at Temple than she does in parts of the outside world, even sometimes in her own neighborhood. We have hard work to do. Our brains are not built for this. But that is what Yom Kippur is all about. Yom Kippur is the day that affirms that we can be better tomorrow than we were yesterday. It is the day that asserts that we can rise above our most problematic instincts and strive to affirm the godliness in ourselves and others. Today is about acknowledging that we can do better and vowing that we will. I learned something through all these stories, that belonging is not like a light switch. Someone does not turn off belonging for you and leave you sitting in the dark. It is not a binary where you either feel it or you don't. Rather, belonging is a melody that is constantly playing when you are in community. And there are moments when people speak so loudly or so harshly that you cannot hear that melody. The people you've heard from today experience those moments of being told in subtle or explicit ways that they do not belong here. And for a moment, that melody was inaudible to them. But they stayed. And they fought, and they continued to work to make sure that this melody of sacred belonging is available to more people in more impactful ways. And we continue to find ways to turn up that music and turn down the distractions so that everyone who walks through our doors can hear it. We call it sacred belonging because it is holy. When you come into this space and feel seen, included, and valued, you know that you are beloved. Not just in the eyes of community, but in the eyes of God. And when that door is closed, it is not just a door to religious practice, it is a door to the divine. Each and every person in this community has a role to play in opening those doors, in welcoming and affirming the people you do not yet know. And in that way, we will continue to build a place worthy of our name, Emanu, our faith in God and God's faith in us. I want to thank you all for the courageous act and the vulnerable act of being with us for this afternoon's experience. We are going to conclude with one more piece of music recorded last year by our Emanu volunteer choir, and that will mark the end of our program. We invite you to join us again at 3:15 for our service of healing and wholeness. Thank you for being with us.
This is home.